All right, here we go. So let's start with Tovia Singer. What's unfolding in Iran right now is all Messianic prophecy. You're not wrong about that, sir. Let's see.
Our people have been reading about for thousands of years, and we're watching it unfold before our eyes.
Yep.
So absolutely. Yeah.
Well, indeed, and this was really the first thing I wanted to ask you. Before we talk about lots of specific things that are happening, sometimes it's important just to zoom out a bit, because you and I look at the world through a Jewish lens, a biblical lens, and you and I know, and I assume many of our viewers also can see, that we are very clearly in the end of days from a Jewish standpoint. The Jews returning to the land of Israel,
the Jewish and a Christian
once
standpoint,
again flourishing, responding to its people, Israel being a great exporter of fruit and vegetable, which is one of the signs, we're told, of the end times. All the world's attention and magnifying glass on Israel. So we've known that, but we've known that for a while, that we're clearly in this time period. I'm wondering, as someone, you are clearly someone that's deeply well read in the prophets, in the what's foretold about what will happen in the end times in the Torah. Are there any developments more recently, maybe in the last few years, last few months, that you want to highlight that maybe can point to some even more specific developments that we should expect to see from a prophetic standpoint?
Yeah, so we have entire chapters in Tanakh that are unfolding right now. The Hebrew Bible very clearly tells us what would occur at the end of days. And you're quite right. The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel before the Messiah comes. Mm-hmm. You know, there are 14 chapters in the book of Zechariah.
He emphasizes that, which it's interesting. This is kind of the Jewish view on why they don't accept Jesus, is they don't accept that he came the first time, but surely you've got to be able to reason that someone could come the first time to lay a foundation and prepare for their kingdom. I don't understand why they're so absolutely against acknowledging that. The next guy we watch is a Messianic Jew, which he does believe that Jesus is the Messiah. But Tovia, man, I think he could wake up so many Jewish people if he were just to realize that Yeshua is the Messiah that they're waiting for. He sees the signs from the Old Testament. We see the signs from the New Testament. I would argue that in some cases we have more evidence. But I don't know. That's probably not true. But we've got some pretty concrete evidence that we're in the end times. And the fact that I think the reason why they refuse to acknowledge that evidence is because it proves that Jesus is the Messiah. He's the one responsible for the book of Revelation. And he's also responsible for giving very specific information about what it's going to be like before he returns. It blows my mind that Tovia Singer, who knows very well what is going to happen before the Messiah returns, will not associate Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21 with those things, which is quite literally what Jesus said. This is what's going to happen before I return. And it's very specific. It's very detailed. And he sees it happening a lot in the Old Testament. And there's way more than he's aware of. Like with the signs in the heavens, the seals, the events, that's pointed to a lot of events. Jesus, for all intents and purposes, Jesus basically gave us the information to know about COVID. Granted, not beforehand. A lot of these things, like you can't recognize it until it happens. But he gave us the information, so basically proved that he told us about COVID. He told us about the Biden administration and what would happen during the Biden administration and the effect that it would have on the entire world. He was right about that. He was right about the woke mind virus. He told us about October 7th before it happened. And Tovia Singer points to that as a key event that points to the return of the Messiah. So close, dude. So close.
And the book of Zechariah is not the easiest book in the world. In fact, Rashi says that in the only introduction he ever...
The book of Zechariah is where the two witnesses are talked about, Zechariah 4. And Zerubbabel, who is the one who starts the foundation of the temple and then finishes it, but the temple's not built by power or by might, it's built by my spirit.
Gives on anything he ever wrote.
Wow.
He says this is a tough book. That's how he starts. And the reason he says that is because it begins with 8 numinous visions, very famous.
Yeah,
This is not
they are
it's
hard to
not very
understand.
complicated. It's not that easy.
You can't understand them until you're living it.
However, there's one chapter in Zechariah that if you don't read it when you're 120 years old, God's going to ask you why you didn't read it, and you're not going to have an excuse because you can read it without any commentary at all. Zechariah 12 tells us about the restoration of the Jewish people to the land of Israel before the Messiah comes,
Yeah.
and the liberation of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem will be a heavy, burdensome stone to all the nations.
My question to Tovia is when the Messiah comes and he tells you his name is Yeshua, are you going to believe him? I think so. I think that I believe that, so Jesus said he won't return until they say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. I believe that there is going to be a recognition. There's going to be an aha moment. And I'm beginning to think that Tovia Singer is a linchpin, and that he's got a level of popularity on the internet that I think that once he cracks, once he realizes that Yeshua is the Messiah, that he's going to be like Paul, to where you're not going to be able to shut him up. He's going to everything he knows about the New Testament is going to fall into place, and he's going to be a force for, this is how I missed it. This is, what you need to understand to see that Yeshua is the Messiah. He keeps pointing to these things that had to happen before the Messiah returns, but it's no coincidence that Christians are also looking for the Messiah right now. It's like you have the Jews looking for the Messiah. They've acknowledged certain events that must happen in the end times, and you have the Christians looking for the Messiah. We're both looking for the Messiah at the same time. It stands to reason we might be looking for the same Messiah. Which the only thing that they're refusing to acknowledge is that the Messiah already came on earth. He was here, and then he had to leave. That's the part they're missing. You're missing the key part that he already came. He started something, and then he had to leave for reasons. He had to go receive his kingdom and then return. So
That come against it. God is going to take a people who for some reason have been weakened. Now, we know from a prophet who lived around the same time, just a little bit earlier, Jeremiah, about the Holocaust, called Jacob's Trouble, in Jeremiah 30, verse 7, in which Jeremiah looks into the future and tells us that there's a day coming, that there's nothing more horrible like what is going to come in the future. Remember, Jeremiah lived during a really bad time. So he's saying in the future, it's called Jacob's Trouble. There'll be nothing like it. That means something really bad. But the end of the passage, umimeno yivoshe.
This is where we're going to get into Gog and Magog. This is why I wanted you guys to see this, is because he's talking about Jacob's trouble. He's talking about it from a Jewish perspective, and then he talks about it with Gog and Magog. And we've been looking, we saw the sign which indicates that we're in seal number 5. And we saw from scripture that seal number 5 is very likely the period of time where we see the Great Tribulation. This is worse than just the tribulation. This is worse than the beginning of sorrows. This is something that happens on the earth that has never happened before. And what's interesting about that is there's been some pretty monumental things that have happened on the earth. So what the hell qualifies for Great Tribulation? Because, if you just look at the flood killed everybody on the planet except 8 peoples, So if the Great Tribulation if that's counted as, worst thing to ever happen on the planet, from God's perspective, that may not be the worst thing. From his perspective, that was a cleansing of the trash and the refreshing of mankind with Noah's family. So from the Great Tribulation in the Greek is thalipsis, and it means pressure. And in a lot of cases, a literal usage of tribulation means crushing pressure. It's not just a pressure; it's a pressure that pushes down, like pushing down grapes. You push something to the point that it breaks, or releases juice. That's the kind of pressure that the Great Tribulation is. So it may be more than just a bunch of massive death around the world, because One of the things we floated is like, so does this mean World War III, where everybody's just nuking each other? I think it's more than that. I think that this is going to be a time of trial and testing to where people are going to be truly challenged in what they believe and, what's going on around them. Right now, I was just listening to somebody today going, I'm not going to go through the Great Tribulation. I could just see somebody knocking on their door and punch them in the face. You know what I mean? It's just like egotistically thinking you're protected from this because they think that there's, they're going to be raptured away before the Great Tribulation. I don't see anything in the scripture that implies that. If anything, I see we go through the Great Tribulation. So seal number 5 is the Great Tribulation, and then it's cut short with the magnetic pole shift. The magnetic pole shift is what actually seems to me like it's going to bring an end to the Great Tribulation. And then that's when we see the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And sometime in seal number 6 is when Christ returns. Probably towards the Festival of Trumpets. Could be right at the opening. I don't know. But anyway, let's go.
Okay, 2 critical words I want you, the viewer, to look up. From this catastrophe, you will be saved.
Yep.
Which is a story of our history. From the blood, B'domai Chayi, we recite at a bris milah, at a circumcision, at a Passover Seder, and actually comes from a passage in the book of Ezekiel.
Our next video is gonna parallel it with Esther and Mordecai, being because we have Purim coming up, and he's of the opinion that that's when the pressure starts to ramp up, is at Purim.
Ezekiel. However, the nation is weakened, but God will strengthen the people of Israel, and even the weakest of them will be like David, even like the angel of the Lord of hosts. If you're tracking this, it's Zechariah 12, verse 7 and 8. God will destroy all the nations that come up against Jerusalem. Against the Messiah is not here yet. This is very critical, because when the Messiah comes, there's complete peace. So these are the immediate events before the Messiah comes. Persia, modern-day Iran, is our implacable enemy. I didn't make it up. It's openly, explicitly Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 5. They are the head of Gog, the nation that, and it doesn't really make sense. Logically, Persia was at the time a benevolent or benign empire to the Jews. Jews didn't have trouble with the Sasanian Empire, the ancient Persian Empire. On the contrary, Cyrus is our good friend. But the prophets say at the end of days, Persia will be your implacable enemy. This is explicit in the text. I hope you'll put this on pause when you're watching this and look up all these critical passages. And then we're told that something catastrophic will happen, in that there will be a mass attack. Now, there's 2 opinions on this. It's the Mashiach ben Yosef moment. But they will look, the nation will turn to me because of those who are killed or stabbed or pierced through. But Dakaru is plural, and that will cause a tremendous mourning among the children of Israel. So this is one of the last preliminary events that triggers the Messianic age. The Jewish people are united in a mourning over a massive terror attack. Now, in case you think that this...
And see, from the Christian perspective, for those who are paying attention to the book of Revelation, that's the opening of seal number 4, death followed by hell. Which we have actual factual data that points to that. So the event that he says signifies to the Jewish people that the Messiah is about to return. The Christians know as seal number 4. That's the death followed by hell.
Sounds conspiratorial. The Talmud tells us in Megillah, page 30, Daf Lamed, tells us that, in fact, Milchemes Gog and Magog, I mean the end-time war, begins on Sukkot. Not only that, the Talmud says that Beglal Zeh, because of this, when the Sabbath that comes out on Sukkot, what does the Haftorah read? Ezekiel 38 and 39. So this is not... So this is, when I say these 2 things, when we're talking about this stuff, this is massive text on this.
So you're saying that event, that Great Terror event, was October 7th, you think?
Yes, everything is pointing in that direction. Absolutely. There's nothing, for the viewers who don't...
Yeah, I don't disagree with everything Tovia says. He and I are in agreement on this. Although I do disagree with him because he says that the one who was pierced is referring to the people who died on October 7th, which it may be. I can see his perspective. I actually have a video I was going to respond to about that, but he says it here. I can see his perspective, but I also see that it can also refer to Yeshua as the one being pierced as well. It could even refer to both because God is just that big. You know, multiple things. You know, he's pretty good at types and shadows and patterns and things that repeat. So it's entirely possible that you know, there's a correlation between Christ's suffering and the Jewish people's suffering.
Get the magnitude of October 7th. So we know it's terrible. But think of, let's take Kristallnacht, right? So Kristallnacht is the trigger, the precursor to the Holocaust, 1938, November 10th, Luther's birthday. So Kristallnacht is the fuse that launches the Holocaust, right? Well, how many Jews were killed on Kristallnacht? 92. I mean, there's just nothing, there's no parallel to this. The Kishinev pogroms of 1903. When we think of massive attacks, so that means a terror.
I think I might be the only person on the internet, only Christian, who is making the claim that I think the Abomination of Desolation is October 7th. And that's based on Matthew 24 and Luke 21, specifically where it says, "For when you see Jerusalem surrounded, then know its desolation is near." I think that's what he's, you know, a lot of what the event that he's pointing to that was a trigger for the people, and also the marker for seal number 4, one of the markers out of many.
Attack. So on Passover.
But unfortunately, there's a lot of Christians who think the Abomination of Desolation is when some guy is going to go into a temple and declare that he is God or desecrate the temple, which I should remind you, the temple doesn't exist right now. It has not been built. And we have no idea if it ever will be built. And also, there's nobody nobody that I'm aware of right now claiming to be God to fit that. So, like, they're still waiting for something to happen that's probably never going to happen. But I do believe that the Abomination of Desolation was October 7th.
On the first day of Passover, 1903, in Kishinev, the Jewish community for 2 days is being slaughtered by Orthodox Christians who think that the Jews killed the Christian boy for the blood for the matzah. Okay? How many Jews were killed? 49. This, by the way, that the Kishinev pogroms, which we all have heard of, and you can see the photographs, it was something that was front page all over the world. That's what triggers Jabotinsky, because he lived a few towns over. This is 1,200 Jews murdered, 251 kidnapped. There's nothing of this magnitude and order in this in a matter of hours. Because if you tell me Chomensky, that was over the course of years. The Holocaust over the course of years. We're talking about one dark Sabbath, a Simchas Torah here in Israel. I was here. It was something. Anything I would say about it would only diminish. There's nothing to talk about. So we are very much living in this very critical time, and this pain, this that was inflicted upon our people, had a remarkable impact not only on us and on unity of the Jewish people, the religiosity of the Jewish people, Hebrew University. Even despite its name, it's not the most religious institution in the world. But they did a survey, it was in the Jerusalem Post a few weeks ago, that 25% of Israelis have become religious after October 7th.
Yeah.
It's just but another thing has happened as well, which is the mystery of October 7th. And that is the middle around the world has fallen out, which means prior to October 7th, anti-Semitism, I mean open, explicit anti-Semitism, was there, but it was expressed by fringe people, not in the mainstream. Here there was the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke, the weirdos. They were always there, but they were always on the fringe. But now it's become mainstream. So people now, like, why after October 7th? So that's exactly what we would expect to find. You know, the famous Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, and in you all the nations of the world will be blessed. God is speaking to Abraham in context. It's an interesting passage because it says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. But wait, we're missing something. What about the people in between? The answer is there will be nobody in between. Like, We just met like in Jerusalem's old city. We never had this conversation.
So the search for terrestrial intelligence 7795 regarding Daniel 12, we actually talked about that quite a lot. In the videos about leading up to February 17th, 2026, I think that's pointing to the Great Tribulation. That's pointing to the war of Gog and Magog. I think that's coming. That seems to line up with what's coming.
But if I ask you, Ali, what do you think of the Chinese, the largest race in the world? I know I'm pretty confident that you're going to say, I don't really have a strong opinion about the Chinese or the Koreans or the Japanese. Yeah, they seem okay. But when it comes to the Jews, if I was sitting on the streets of Manchester, London, Antwerp, San Francisco, and asked people, what do you think of the Jews? And the only part of this thought experiment was, the only caveat is they had to say the truth. You and I know exactly what would happen. You will either say, I hate the Jews or I love the Jews. We are, and that's why we could see people from the extreme right, extreme left, who are joined together in this orgy of hatred for Israel after.
We'll listen to this a little bit longer, till probably about here, and then we'll switch to the other video.
October 7th. So everything that is unfolding now is right in Scripture.
Yep.
That's absolutely fascinating. And so this great mourning that, was it Zechariah that speaks of this great mourning that will occur?
Yeah.
So,
Zechariah 12.
Zechariah 12, right. So you think that that was basically the great mourning was in response to October 7th?
Right. And the Talmud says it begins on Sukkot. And there's nothing. What I did was I just took two Kristallnacht. So people think of Kristallnacht correctly as the precursor to the Holocaust, right? I don't have to explain to anyone what Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht pales. It was 92 Jews were murdered in Kristallnacht. Granted, hundreds of synagogues were destroyed for sure. It pales in comparison to what occurred on October 7th in a matter of hours. We're going to find out, unfortunately, what happened. It was a perfect storm of everything that could go wrong went wrong. But the one mystery, and we haven't, for the viewers to know, we haven't had a conversation prior to this. The one mystery that befuddles us all is, why all the hatred now after October 7th? Or the love now? Yeah. Like, why are people, so many people who saying, I love the Jews now, and I didn't before October 7th, or conversely, I hate the Jews now, and prior to that, they were relatively quiet on the matter. What's happening? That's what's happening.
Right. Yeah, my sense is October, like a lot of this, as you say, was simmering under the surface, and October 7th, so if I saw as like the day it just burst the bubble, and suddenly everyone had to kind of focus in on this, and for good or for ill, and precisely as you say, like you'd expect a lot of sympathy. On the other hand, there's that famous line of, I think it was Howard Jacobson, that Europe never forgave the Jews for the Holocaust, meaning that, you know, the need to have sympathy for the Jews also causes all kinds of resentment and envy. That's absolutely fascinating, your assessment of this. I've heard some people, though, say that when they look at how Gog and Magog is described, some people say it more seems to point towards Turkey. So what's your reaction to that?
You don't have to guess this one through. There's only one source in all of Tanakh where the word Gog is mentioned. Yep. This is not like it's all over the place. This is not like some weird idea. It's just very simple. It's a confederacy of nations led by Persia. It's right in there. Again, our source, Ezekiel 38, doesn't matter what translation you use, it's Persia. The reason, again, Persia is counterintuitive. Israel never had a direct war.
See, this is the first time I've ever actually heard Gog of Magog referred to as Persia. I've always heard that it was Russia, because I was of the opinion that Russia-Ukraine was Gog of Magog. But he's saying that it's the Iran, what's happening with Iran right now is Gog of Magog.
Or with Persia. We've had wars directly with Syria, with Egypt, with Jordan. We have them all. But number two, it's not an Arab country. We don't have a land border with them. Persia, meaning modern day Iran, is 1,000 kilometers east of where I am right now. They're very far away, and yet they are our implacable enemy. They're the head of the snake. So this is not like a guessing game. Moreover, I want to just solve a mystery. People going, Gog, what's that? So Gog Magog, the War of Gog, everyone knows about that. But what does it mean? So I want to just saturate that and give a little meaning to it.
Please. And also, can
So,
you clarify what is Magog?
yeah, well, but that means from it actually Gog Magog does not appear in Tanakh, that phrase,
Yeah.
but Gog, it actually says in Ezekiel 38, please look it up, Gog from the land of Magog.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how it's. But Gog Magog is gematria. Its numerical value is 70, referring to the 70 nations. That's why that phrase itself is not in the Bible. But the key point is, what is Gog? What does that mean? What is that? There is no country called Gog. So why did Ezekiel call it Gog? Moreover, it's very interesting when the Messiah comes. This is so intriguing. We're told in Scripture, specifically Daniel chapter 7, verse 13, one of the most famous Messianic prophecies about the Messiah himself, that one like a son of man, meaning he has a daddy,
That's
not
right.
born of a virgin, will come with.
Okay, so we've addressed this before on how Jesus is the Son of Man. If you're new here or if you missed that video, matter of fact, I showed a video last night on the live that I started working on to illustrate how Jesus is the Son of Man. He had a daddy. God is technically his daddy, in the same way that God is Adam's daddy. Now, what he's referring to is a sperm donor. Like Adam did not have a sperm donor. That's why God is Adam's father, the first man ever made. You know, he was formed from the dust of the ground, and God did the forming, which is what makes God the father of Adam. Well, he did the same thing with Jesus in that Jesus was born of a virgin, meaning she hadn't had intercourse with any men, so there was no sperm donor to actually contribute the seed. But I've made the argument, and I could be wrong, but I've made what I think is a valid argument for how the genetics required for God to make a seed are all in the rib. So the ribs are they produce stem cells, which are cells that can be converted into any other cell in the body. This is why God took a bone from Adam and formed Eve, because all the material needed to make a body was in the rib. So based on that information, we can infer that that is one possible explanation for how God was able to form the seed from Mary in order to impregnate her. So there didn't need to be anything miraculous other than him converting stem cells into seed and implanting them into Mary, which still made Jesus human, still had a seed. He was still formed from both a sperm and an egg. But what it did is it made it so that he did not inherit the Y chromosome from Adam. So there's something about Adam's Y chromosome that is blemished. So Jesus would have had a brand new Y chromosome that would have been equal to what Adam had before he sinned. Same genetic material. So that's the thing that Tovia is missing here. And he makes this point that Son of Man means mommy and a daddy. So there is an explanation there for how Jesus, and this is why John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth on him will not perish but have everlasting life." Begotten is a very specific word. It means sperm and an egg. That is what to beget means, is it means a man contributed his seed to impregnate into a woman. There's the implication of seed and egg coming together. So in this case, because there wasn't a man to contribute the seed, it was God who likely formed the seed from Mary to make Yeshua, which made him the Son of Man. He fulfilled that Son of Man. So that's something that Tovia is missing and doesn't understand. And to be honest, this is another thing that I think I'm probably the only person on the internet who's made this connection before. Not trying to toot my own horn. I demand explanations for things. I don't, quote unquote, just accept things on faith, especially when there's a plausible explanation. And we know this is possible because there's a process called gametogenesis in science where they have done this exact thing. They have taken the stem cells from mice. They took a female mouse, took stem cells from her rib, caused that cell to become seed and planted it into the same mouse, and she produced a baby mouse. So this is something we know is a very real possibility. So much so that even women who prefer women as their partners are looking to this process in order to produce children among themselves. We are definitely living in the days of Noah. But yeah, so there's that is so underreported that people aren't aware of that. But why that's important is because Jesus had to have blood, right? Because it's the blood that cleanses. And without the blood, there is no cleansing. There is no atonement. So we do, Christians do believe that Jesus was a man, We made a whole movie about it called The Chosen. Let's continue.
The clouds of heaven, coming with the clouds of heaven to the Ancient of Days, which is God. This is God. This is complete consensus.
Yep.
And then the Almighty in verse 14 says that all nations will serve him, meaning that when the Messiah comes, there will be all nations will come, as Isaiah 61 says, arise and shine for you. 60, arise and shine, your light has come. Kings will go by your light. So why is the Messiah coming with clouds of heaven? What does he need? What are the clouds about? Okay, this really becomes very simple. Gog in Hebrew means what? A roof. A Gog means a roof, right? Just simple. A Gog in.
See, this is where Judaism has an advantage, I think, over Christians because they speak the language of the Old Testament. Most people who don't speak the language and are left to the materials for us to understand the language have a harder time understanding this. This is the first time I've heard this too. I don't know if it's true. But it's the first time I've heard this under this interpretation of Gog Magog.
Hebrew means the roof, right? So you have a people that trust in a reinforced concrete roof. Okay, they go to war against those who don't trust in the reinforced concrete roof, but rather those who trust in the clouds of heaven.
It's really interesting that he says this because both in Matthew 24 and in Revelation 6, seal number 6, it does mention about the bunkers, about people going into the mountains and underneath the mountains. So 5th seal, 6th seal. The mighty men and every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks and in the mountains and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. And then in Matthew, you've also got, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with great glory. And let's see, no, that's, then the sign of the sun, and then the tribes of the earth will mourn. I think that's what he's referring to. This might be a parallel to what he's referring to where if Gog Magog, if it truly does mean roof, and he's likening it to like a bomb shelter or a bunker, that could be referring to what drives people underground because of what they see coming. Oops, I lost the video. There it is.
Meaning they trust in the Almighty God. Oh, and what happens is essentially you have the roof people who trust in the physical world going to war against those who trust in the Sukkah, who trust in the Schach, who trust in the clouds of glory that protected the children of Israel miraculously in their 40-day trek journey throughout the wilderness.
Interesting.
And that's really the end time war. It's the roof people against the cloud people. And this is so beautiful. That's why at the end of Zechariah, what are we told? All the nations at the end of days, they're going to celebrate a Jewish holiday. What holiday are all the nations of the world going to celebrate in verse 16?
Sukkot.
Sukkot. Why are they celebrating Sukkot? Well, in what universe do...
So I asked Grok about this, because he referred to this a couple of times. I wasn't sure what he was referring to. Oh, hey, I didn't know you could do dual pages. That's cool. We don't really need to do that. How do I separate this? Arrange, split views, separate views. There you go. So I asked it. I heard the Talmud says Zechariah 12 starts of Sukkot, and he says, "Yeah, let's see. I think I know what you heard. It's a bit garbled, but points to a real Talmudic passage. The Talmud, which is Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Sukkah 52a, directly quotes and discusses Zechariah 12, verses 10, and especially 12 in the context. Here, let's go read those. Zechariah 12. Hmm. 12. And then where was it? It was Zechariah 12, verses 10 and 12. So we'll read 10 through 12. 10. All right. Mourning for the pierced one. And I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one who mourns for his only son. Christians see this as Jesus because he was crucified. Jews look at this as Tovia is saying that this is pointing to October 7th. Yes, they will mourn for him as one who mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one who grieves for a firstborn. In that day there shall be a great mourning in Jerusalem, like the mourning of Hadad Rimmon in the plain of Megiddo. And the land shall mourn, every family by itself, the family of the house of David by itself, and their wives by themselves, the family of the house of Nathan by itself, and their wives by themselves. All right, so that's what the Talmud is referring to, that Tovia is referring to. So now we have some context here. In the context of Sukkot, or Sukkos, or Sukkos, the Feast of Tabernacles, the whole tractate, Sukkah, is about the laws and customs of Sukkot, so that this Sukkos link, it's not in Zechariah 12, literally says the start of Sukkot or anything like that, but rabbis use it to derive a practical rule now for Sukkot celebrations, how Sukkot celebrations should be run. Quick breakdown of what the Talmud actually says here. They're talking about the super joyful Simchat Beit Hashuva water drawing celebration during Sukkot in the temple era, a huge party with music, dancing, lights. So is that what he was? Is that why they were in the desert at the festival, partying, to keep things holy and prevent any impropriety from the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, kicking in amid all rejoicing? They had a separation of men and women, like in Makitza. How do you prove this is necessary? They quote Zechariah 12:12 about a future end of days mourning, M-O-U-R-N, mourn, and the land shall mourn, every family apart, the family of the house of David apart, and their wives apart. The Talmud says, if even in that future time of mourning, when the evil inclination won't even be strong, the Torah requires men and women to be separate, then all the more so. During our current Sukkot rejoicing, we definitely need separation. That's the direct tie to the Sukkot practices. Right before that, they quote Zechariah 12:10, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one who mourns for an only son, and debate what the mourning is for. One opinion, mourning for Mashiach ben Yosef, Messiah, son of Joseph, who gets killed in the war of Gog and Magog. Interesting. Other opinion, mourning for the evil inclination itself being slain by God in the future. This passage is often brought up in Jewish Christian discussions because of the pierced part, but that's a whole other topic. It is a whole other topic. Side note on actual Sukkot readings: the official Haftarah prophetic reading for the first day of Sukkot is actually Zechariah 14, not 12, which talks about all the surviving nations coming up to Jerusalem every year to celebrate Sukkot in the Messianic era. That's the more direct Sukkot in the future prophecy. So yeah, the Talmud doesn't say Zechariah 12 equals the start of Sukkot, but does heavily reference Zechariah 12 while laying down rules for Sukkot observances. That's almost certainly the thing you heard about. Yeah, so that's the relation that he is talking about in the Talmud regarding. So that's why he thinks October 7th is Zechariah 12. I'd just say that it's both. It could be referring to October 7th and the Messiah, because both of them result in mourning.
Non-Jews celebrate Sukkot in Jewish law, but suddenly all the non-Jews who accept the God of Israel, who stand by Israel, will celebrate the festival that celebrates the clouds. Ah, now we understand. This is so magnificent. This is so mind-blowing. So what happens is the nations that stood by Israel means they trusted in the clouds of heaven rather than the roof, and therefore they're going to celebrate the festival of Sukkot with the Jewish people. So that's what's unfolding right now.
Wow. And I actually remember thinking as October 7th was unfolding in the days afterwards that, the fact that we read, I can't remember which number it is. What Psalm number were we reading in the month of Elul and then over Rosh Hashanah? About of David, the Lord is my light and my salvation. I can't remember. It's 20 something. I can't remember which one it is. But the fact that we basically it says there that when my enemies rise against me and war will encircle me, I will trust in God. And it also spoke about false witnesses rising against me who breathe violence. The word for violence was Hamas.
Psalm
and
2 and
I
3.
thought, well, yeah, exactly. That's precisely what Hamas is. That's precisely what the Palestinian movement is. They are false witnesses. They're claiming that we are thieves to the land and that they are the real rightful owners. I wonder if you resonated at all with any of that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the critical part of the numinous psalms, like Psalm 23, and this King David is building to this in that he's saying King David had numerous enemies in his life. In Psalm 23 and then Psalm 27, all these Psalms, King David is ultimately saying, God is the only one that can protect me. He is the one that surrounds me. He is the only one. We actually have prophecy in Tanakh of when Jerusalem would be liberated, when this would occur. It's in the book of Daniel that it would occur 2,300 years after Alexander the Great would defeat Xerxes in the famous Battle of Granicus. The events that are occurring right now are so precise. It's so interesting, Ali. We met on a Friday evening. I was going to the Western Wall. I think you were leaving on a Friday night prayer. I believe so. We met in the Old City. And this goes back to what you said from the very beginning. If you want to talk to God, go to the Western Wall. If you want to see God, go to the Shuk, the market in Jerusalem, and see the abundance of vegetables and the abundance of growth there, because these are the promises that are unfolding now, that the land which Mark Twain, when he visited Israel, was nothing. There was nothing here. He writes about that in his work, Innocents Abroad.
Right. There's a lot more really good stuff in this video. We're going to skip it. He does talk about Tucker Carlson. I'm really tempted to skip ahead to that, but I want to stay on Gog Magog and then come over here to this guy who I found today and listen to what he has to say, because he's got a warning. Now, I'm not vouching for this guy. It's just somebody who showed up in my feed today I thought was interesting because it's along the line of Gog Magog. He associates it with Purim, and which is coming up in March 2nd. So we're just days away from this, which is very interesting because there's a very interesting planetary alignment that's happening February 28th. So right before Purim, there is a planetary alignment of 6 of the planets, which is interesting. 6 is the number for man. And also, I think there's a blood moon coming up here soon, too. So let's listen to what he has to say in regards to this.
But the Spirit did not let me rest, told me to release. It is the middle of the night here in Seoul, South Korea, and I'm after significant surgery. But the Spirit did not let me rest, told me to release to you this shocking and chilling word. As often the Spirit of God showed me something in the most unexpected times, even in times.
So normally I don't listen to people who have dreams and visions and talk to Jesus and stuff like that. The way he's wording this is probably the only way I would take this to be serious is he's referring to the Spirit of God, which I think that we're all capable of hearing that still small voice. I do believe that God talks to us and we recognize him in our own ways. It's just there's so many people out there right now who are saying God's giving them information. It's hard to know, who is really hearing from God, listening to that still small voice, or or that are confusing their own thoughts for the Spirit speaking to them. Now, the way he words this, I feel kind of gives credibility to it because like I've had those nights of restlessness where I couldn't go to sleep because something was just yelling at me in my head. I've also had those nights to where, it was just a still small voice. So I can relate. So that's why I didn't immediately click away from his video.
That I'm in great pain. So this video, right ahead of Purim, is a significant video. All I'm asking you to do is to share, like, and consider supporting the poor and the needy today at the link below. This week, we're receiving the biggest hint that the attack upon Iran is imminently about to happen. Although I tell you again and again, we cannot play with times and dates. I believe that everything is lined up for an attack, an imminent attack of the United States and possibly Israel during the week of Parashat Tetzaveh. I would like to line it up to you specifically with Purim right this morning. You're probably wondering what it has to do with Gog and Magog as well. I hope that this video will reach the thousands and the tens of thousands. Our rabbis revealed to us a terrible secret, and in all the years reading the Megillah, I had never seen it until today, right after my surgery. I read in the Torah portion this week, this Friday, we enter in Tetzaveh when we read the word. Attach the two stones to the shoulder pieces of the ephod as stones for remembrance of the Israelite people, whose name Aaron will carry upon the two shoulder pieces for remembrance before God. Did you notice that? This Shabbat, we are enter into Shabbat Zechor. This is an important Shabbat. And there is a connection between Gog and Magog, Shabbat Zechor, and Iran that I want to reveal to you today. Please share this video. In the Torah portion this week, it says that Aaron took the two stones and they call Avnei Zikaron. It's the stone of Zikaron. The word Zikaron coming from the word Zechor. And the rabbis point to us that the reason we are saying today in Shabbat Zechor these things, because it is a direct reference to the book of Deuteronomy. This Shabbat, right before America is attacking, to Deuteronomy 25:17, when it says, Zechor et asher asa lecha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you. You notice that those two stones are a memorial for what Amalek has.
All right. That ticking in the background is annoying. I want to switch over here to this real quick.
We think it's going to be a swarming attack, multiple different attacks. We think it's going to be a swarming attack, multiple different attacks at.
So this is something that showed up on the Sean Ryan show from Sarah Adams. This is something that, so they're aware that there are sleeper cells in America. And this is kind of what I'm expecting the Great Tribulation to be like, is to where there is something globally that's prepared. And it makes sense that it's associated with Iran. Who's here? Hopefully I know them. Something that's associated with Iran. And sorry, just trying to tell if that's my wife or somebody else. I think that's my wife. If anything happens to me in the next 5 minutes, maybe the Great Tribulation is starting. Such a weird timing with playing this video. But what he's talking about reminded me of this.
One time across multiple cities. We think there will be bombers just because some of the attackers went through bomber training and they have these vests. And then we think there's these Fideian attackers who will carry on until they're killed.
So these guys are trained and they are going to fight until they're killed.
Yes.
There's no stopping them.
Exactly. And that matters, right? So I was watching this video and it was a bombing in Kabul years ago. The bomber blew up and then everyone starts moving in, the first responders move in, and then another guy walks in and blows up. We know this is a tactic, right? But if Americans don't understand this is a tactic and don't understand these attackers are going to fight to the death, we have to be very careful that we don't have more people die in these second and third order effects of not knowing their intent. We think it's going to be a swarming attack.
All right, so this video made me think of Sarah Adams here. And I'm not trying to fearmonger. I'm just pulling pieces together of things that are happening around us. By all accounts, it looks like we're in seal number 5. And during seal number 5 seems to be when the Great Tribulation happens, according to Matthew 24. And the Great Tribulation is going to be worse than anything that's ever happened on the earth before, which gives an indication of scale. So I think it's worth listening to these kind of things. This guy seems to be credible. I could be wrong. Like I said, he just showed up in my feed today. But it's interesting that it's associated with Gog and Magog.
It's done to you. And the rabbis told us that this is the Shabbat on the prophetic calendar where Amalek is going to be wiped out. Am I saying that this is going to happen this week? I am not saying anything. I am just pointing to you what the rabbis are telling us. And they couldn't.
So he's got Zechariah is connected to Amalek, Iran, and Gog and Magog. And I would point out here, so let me give a recap of what we've covered in regards to this before. So Matthew 24, well, I'm here. Let's see, Matthew 12 here. So Matthew 12 seems to be associated with the Great Tribulation, or sorry, Daniel 12. At that time, Michael, this is referring to, I believe, Michael the archangel. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as was never since there was a nation even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. All right, so that's Daniel 12, and then where's Matthew 24? Matthew 24 right here. Too far. Right. Where's the highlight? Now I'm in Matthew 25. Where's my highlights? Hmm? Yeah, let me refresh the page. There it is. For some reason it disappeared. All right, so here, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, I believe this is October 7th, standing in the holy place, and let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is in the housetop not go down to take anything out of the house, and let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant, to those who are nursing babies in those days, and pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. That, I think, was October 7th, which is what Tovia Singer was associating with Zechariah 12, the great piercing, the mourning like a newborn. And then right here, seal number 5, I think, is the Great Tribulation. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world. Until this time, no, nor ever shall be. It'd be interesting to to see if the world is actually in the original text, because when we look back at Daniel 12, it says since the beginning of nations, such as never was since there was a nation. See, that would make more sense to me, that whatever happens here is worse, is the worst thing to ever happen since there's been nations. That would actually make more sense, but it does say since the beginning of the world, but this would be worth investigating. Until this time, no, nor ever shall be, and unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. So there's an indication of death here. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. So it sounds like it's not going to last so long that everybody dies. Then if anyone says to you, so this is interesting because this tells you what it's going to be like. It can't be all that bad because people are going to think they're going to be seeing Jesus everywhere, which it's weird now that we have AI and deep fakes that, people are going to be making deep fakes of Jesus showing up. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. I think that's a callback to John 14:29 when Jesus says, I tell you these things beforehand so that when they come to pass, you will believe. See, Jesus says, see, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if anyone says to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out, or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. Then right after that is, for as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, because remember that tribulation is cut short, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And then here we've got seal number 5, which when he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the soul of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on the earth, on those who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little longer, until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who would be killed as they were was completed. So in seal number 5, there's the indication that there's still going to be death happening to believers. So those people who say that you're going to be raptured away before the Great Tribulation, it doesn't fit with the order of things. There's people who are going to die during seal number 5. And then you have seal number 6. I looked when he opened the 6th seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. So there's a parallel here to Matthew. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. And the stars of heaven fell to the earth as fig trees drop its figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven will be shaken. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island moved out of its place. This is what indicates that the magnetic pole shifts, because every island so the sky rolling up and the islands and the mountains moving out of their place implies that the earth is going to roll over in a way that it doesn't normally rotate. So the North Pole is going to go down to the equator. South Pole is going to go up to the equator. Here is a visual of what it's going to look like. This was not only after the pole shift, but also after the bowl judgment, which implies that the supercontinent Pangea is coming back. We've talked about that before, but let's not get sidetracked. I'm trying to do a quick summary here. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up. Every mountain, every island was moved out of its place. And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, commanders, and mighty men, every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains. I wonder if this is Gog Magog. And said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide the face from him who sits on the throne from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come. Okay, so what does all of that mean? So we've got this information based on the seals being opened. It looks like seal number 5 started on February 17th. What it seems, so with the situation with Iran, you've got rabbis who are saying that it's Gog and Magog. You've got this guy saying that this video we were just watching, this guy saying that it's Gog and Magog and associated with Iran and Amalek, which is associated with Esther and Mordecai because Amalek tried to kill them, kill the Jews. And he thinks that this is going to start happening on Purim. And then at the same time, you also have intelligence officers saying that all the countries of the world have been invaded and there's sleeper cells that are waiting to cause great havoc. This seems like it's all pointing to the Great Tribulation, which would be right in the middle of seal number 5. The good news is if this is correct, if that does happen, then you can know that it's not going to last very long. It's not going to last any more than 6 months. So do with this information what you will. It may not happen. Nothing may happen in March, the beginning of March, but there sure is a lot of stuff pointing to something happening very soon. The tensions with Iran, which I'm even monitoring the video feed of Iran, looking for anything here. So this is Iran, Tehran. So far, so good. I don't see anything on fire, but that's where we are. All right, let's continue listening to this guy.
Connected it to Iran, to Persia, specifically to chapter 9 of the book of Esther, when it says the following: these days are recalled and observed in every generation by every family, every province, and every city. In these days of Purim shall never cease among the Jews, and the memory of them shall never perish among their descendants. Do you notice this? It says in Hebrew that their memory will not leave. What is the word in Hebrew for memory? The Hebrew word for memory is the word izkor. 3 times we see this word, zikaron, izkor, memorial, in this Shabbat Torah portion, in connection to Amalek destruction.
So what he's saying is that there's the story of Esther and even Exodus here is pointing to Amalek and Esther and Purim, which, given where we are in the timeline, I got nothing to refute that. I mean, that this could be regarding the supercontinent. I see you guys talking about the supercontinent. I've heard there's 2 things I've heard about the supercontinent. So we know in where is it? Numbers, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. No, I think it's in Numbers where it says, "In the days of Peleg was the earth divided." There is scriptural support for the possibility of the continents moving apart. We do know that they are on tectonic plates, and we do know that they move. That's what causes earthquakes. It's also possible that just there's additional water, and that's why we have, separation between the continents. I'm aware of the different theories, but the reason why that supercontinent came up is because of the last bowl. So if you look here, first bowl, second bowl, fifth bowl. No, it's the bowl or the trumpet. I always get these mixed up. Where's the trumpet? Shoot, did I pass it? I passed it. 6th bowl, 7th bowl. One day on a show, I was saying that it's interesting that the islands and the mountains are referenced in 2 different places. So if you look at this here, though, so this is the seventh bowl, which is at the very end of the very end. So this is like the seventh seal, the seventh bowl. But this is what it says about that. Then every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. Which this is different than seal number 6, which says they were moved out of their place. So there's a difference. So seal number 6 seems to be referring to what we're, and the reason I say this is because we're literally observing the movement of the planet, of the poles. More specifically, what's his face is. Nope, not that one.
Hey, bro!
I got a little present.
Listen, I was trying to buy this handcrafted mahogany wood model of a B-25 Mitchell Panchito.
Hang on. Let me find the video with observers. This guy.
Earth's magnetic field comes out of the polar region. Technically, it comes out of the south, and it wraps around the whole planet.
We're literally watching the magnetic poles move, and we can see that they're moving, and the movement is increasing. And this has happened. They speculate that this has happened before, and that it explains why there's woolly mammoths are found at the North Pole with undigested food in their mouth. So that's why I say seal number 6 is probably the magnetic pole shifting, but that doesn't explain the islands and the mountains fleeing away. Like, what causes a mountain to go away? Well, we know tectonic plates are likely the cause of mountains because the process of one plate going under another causes the land to rise up. So it's just an assumption on my part that bowl number 7 is potentially talking about Pangea, if this is in fact a reality, which you can't tell me it's a dumb idea, because anybody looking at a map can see these things fit together. I mean, look at this. The United States, this is, it's just like they fit together like a frickin' jigsaw puzzle. And I would even argue that this could even go down more right there and fit and make a single land mass. So, I know Kent Hovind has made the argument that you don't need the earth, you don't need the continents to move away. All you need is the water to come in and recede. So that could be another thing. The water could recede, revealing a single land mass, and that would still be true. So it doesn't matter if it's a tectonic plate shifting, and we get back to the point being, my entire point about bowl number 7 is that one of the only ways that I can think of to describe the islands and the islands fleeing away and the mountains being no more is, well, I guess it would have to be more than just the water. Anyway, it seems to be pointing at a single land mass. So it looks like we have 2 events coming. One is the magnetic pole shift, which changes the planet to be like this without the single land mass. Imagine if everything's back in their original place. And then after it rotates, or actually, no, this is just Pangea. This is the rotation and the single land mass. Hang on, I'm going to go back to this video.
And
in connection to the book of Esther, found here in chapter 9, verse 23. Brothers and sisters, this cannot be a coincidence. And I want you to understand this. Our rabbis explain and continue in their explanation, and they say that this passage in the book of Esther, speaking, and I quote, of a decree that although has been passed, has not been fully passed. And I quote, it is belong to the final chapter of the decree that have to be reversed. And it will be reversed in the final war against Amalek, which is now known by the name of Haman and now known by the name of Esav. I want you to understand what I am telling you here, because you're going to see that when this war starting, we are entering the final countdown for the coming of the Messiah.
100%.
And I invite you to read the Fall of Edom, the new Hamas, and my upcoming book, Milchemet Emunah. Please, it's not about selling books. It's about what God revealed to me years ago that is happening right at this moment before us. I want you to understand that.
I do believe that God has been revealing this to people for the last 50 years, because I don't think it's any coincidence that everybody's on the same page right now. You know what I mean?
We are in Shabbat Zechor. And here the rabbis continue, and they connected the beginning of this word when Aaron himself have the two stones of memorials to what happened in Amalek. The same word is about Esther, and the rabbis told us this is about the future. But wait, it did not just end there. Let me continue for one moment. The rabbis themselves connected it to the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 29, which it says, "Rejoice not, all Philistia, because the staff of him that beat you is broken. Far from the stalk of the snake will be sprout and asp." You see what is happening right now in the world? The birthing of Satan, the birthing of the anti-Messiah, the birthing of the final forces of evil are being birthed, and they are birthed according to the rabbis.
What word
Is
is he
Shabbat
saying?
Zechor,
Birted?
the Shabbat we're entering to now, and they connected it to Purim. What a shocking thing it is for us. But it didn't finish there. What does it mean that he's birthed? The rabbi has explained to us the following, that this is the birthing of Gog and Magog. I'm not telling you that Gog and Magog final episode is birthing this weekend. Please understand it. I am pointing to the possibility of what the rabbis point to us. They says in Psalm 80 verse 14, "Wild pig will chew at it, and creature of the forest feed on it." The rabbis pointed this, and they said that the creature of the forest are birthing. Brothers and sisters, they all are birthing from Esav, from Satan, from Aman, and ultimately from Iran himself.
He's saying birthing.
The word in Hebrew for forest is the word Ya'ar. Ya'ar. The word here is the word Mi-Ya'ar. Listen to what the rabbi said. They say, if you remove the letter Ain,
Great
which
Tribulation
is
is associated
70,
with labor pains.
which is in Gematria, Gog and Magog,
See, this is what
you
Tovia
get
said.
the Hebrew word Amalekite.
See, I don't think that it's any coincidence. I've never heard this before in my life. And then on the same day, both Tovia Singer and this guy brings up that Gog Magog is gematria for 70, referring to the 70 nations of Amalek.
Amalekite, Amaleki in Hebrew. This is a sign that the war against Iran is the war against Amalek that is about to birth the Mashiach.
Yeah, so I know he is kind of hard to understand. What he's saying, so Purim starts on, Fury, can you correct me? I think it starts at sundown on March 2nd and goes until March 3rd, till sundown on March 3rd. So that is Purim. And Purim is the festival recognizing the saving of the Jewish people from the Amalekites. So it's Esther. It's the book of Esther. Specifically, I think like 3 and 4 to like 9. Basically, the whole book of Esther is what Purim is. And what he is saying is that he spiritually feels that the attack on Iran to finally break the hold that it has on the world, being the serpent, is going to take place. It's going to start on Purim. That's what he is saying. That's what I think he is saying. And that this is the battle of Gog and Magog mentioned in Ezekiel 38, which seems to be the same thing that Tovia Singer is saying. He's just given a start date of Purim of March 2nd. He thinks that that's when it's going to start. And I'm just because, we've been talking about seal number 5 and the Great Tribulation, I'm putting this together to where, okay, it seems like this is probably the Great Tribulation because it seems, 70 nations. Anyway, does that make sense? That's basically what he is saying. He's talking about a lot of other things that led him to this conclusion that are hard to follow with like the gematria and the different other places. He talked about some Exodus. But that's the reason why we're watching this.
And Satan into the world, meaning they're about to reveal themselves. But take a break, because I'm about to show you something that in all my life, studying the scriptures, I have not seen until today in my distress after a surgery. And that's why I'm releasing this video to you, saints, because I want you to know that our Messiah is coded here in the text in Esther 9:28, where it says, again, the days are recalled and observed in every generation by every family, every province, in every city. And these days of Purim shall never cease among the Jews, even though the final decree has not passed yet. And the memory of them shall never be forgotten among their descendants. You know what was this word in Hebrew? Never be forgotten. The Hebrew word for never be forgotten is a name of a person. He has never been forgotten, and he will not be forgotten, and he has a name because he is coming. When the war in Iran and Israel is breaking, he's about to be remembered again. What is the word here? In the Hebrew, his name is, in Hebrew, here is the word Yasuf. The word Yasuf, according to the Ramad, comes from the word Yosef. Who is Yosef, if not Yeshua?
It is Yeshua.
Brothers and sisters, you can quote me on that the name Joseph is quoted with the word of Iran that is coming upon us. We are receiving the code, and it will be interesting to see if this Shabbat or during next week we will start to see the birthing of Joseph to the world. Again, let me summarize it to you. Shabbat Zechor, mentioned in this Torah portion. It's mentioned with Amalek, and it's mentioned in Esther 9:28. It's a direct connection to Zechariah 14 and Psalm 80, which talking about the birthing of Satan.
The birthing
when
of Satan.
Israel fighting against Amalek, the final war against Amalek is going to be the final birthing. The letter Ayin is Gog and Magog. And who is the one who's going to come to remove the final decree? You got it.
Interesting, very interesting. Ayin, which is Gog and Magog, is before us if war breaks during Purim.
It is Yosef himself. I urge you, call upon Yosef today. And please, for the love of God, bring tzedakah, this Purim, to the poor and the needy. This is what we are commanded to do during the Purim. I hope that in my distress from the end of the world, this video will reach the thousands. Please read The Fall of Edom, The New Hamas, and my upcoming.
There you go. Well, that's probably enough. I actually have more that we could get into, but we're at about 2.5 hours. That's a pretty long day. But isn't that weird? Has anybody else heard that Gog and Magog means 70 and is associated with the 70 nations of Amalek? I've never heard that before. I'd always heard that it was Russia, Gog of Magog, or Gog of Magog, where Magog was Russia. Was that from Jimmy Evans or something like that? I heard that from. Maybe Heisner, maybe Michael Heisner. I think he's done some interpretations of Gog and Magog. I'd never heard that the gematria of it was 70 and it was associated with Amalek, which is associated with Iran. So that's new. It kind of fits. I mean, seal number 5 seems as though it was opened. You know, the martyrs who died as witnesses testifying to Jesus are saying, they're under the altar going, "How much longer, Lord?" Until judgment. And you got Daniel 12, which talks about a time of great tribulation. So this could be it. This could be the final battle. This could be the Great Tribulation right before the return of Yeshua. And boy, oh boy, I guess this really what this goes to show is it's impossible to understand these things until you're living them. Like nobody would ever think about this 20 years ago. You know, everything we've speculated on for you know, our entire lives, anytime anyone spent any time on this, never would have accounted for AI. Never would have thought that the world would be in the state that it is in right now. I mean, like just 10 years ago, the world was entirely different. Can you imagine? Can you remember back to how things changed because of COVID, because of the Biden administration, because of the woke mind virus? Can you imagine how many people, how many of these leftists who have been fighting for unsecured borders because they want the Mexicans to come in so that they can vote Democrats, or so that they can get additional get the census to give them additional seats so that they can keep Democrats in power, when really all this time they've been allowing the United States to be invaded so that Amalek can rise and try once again to kill the children of Israel. And we know how that's going to end. I imagine some will die. There's going to be martyrs. Servants and brothers will die as they are. Yeah, I mean, like everything's coming together. Both Jews and Christians see where we are in the end times. I'd say some of us see better than others, because there are many, some of you guys probably in the chat today, who don't even think the seals have been opened. But I do believe the seals have been opened. I think we're right at seal number 5, and it looks like we're very close to the return of Christ. And if this does happen, then it really points to number 6 being the magnetic pole shift, which is interesting. As far as the coming in the clouds, that's an interesting one. He might be right about that. But I don't know. I kind of like the idea of Jesus showing up in a spaceship, because that's just way cooler. Anyway, you guys, thank you so much for joining me tonight. If you like this content, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Comment if you have anything that you want to talk about in regards to what we learned tonight. Do you think that, you know, the war with Iran is going to escalate into a global battle? Do you think people have invaded the United States? Let me know your thoughts. Let's continue this conversation. Yeah, and come back and visit us. I do these lives Monday through Friday at 4:30 Pacific Standard Time, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. And we'll see you again tomorrow. God bless you guys. Shalom, shalom. The good news here is keep looking up. Messiah is coming soon. Your redemption is coming soon. God bless you guys. Shalom.